term nihilist first appeared in 1799 in a letter written by Friedrich Heinrich Jacobi, who used it to criticize rationalism and Kantian thought. He described Fichte's idealism as a culmination of atheism and nihilism, leading to the nullification and annihilation of being. However, it was the Russian writer Ivan Turgenev who popularized the term in 1862 with the publication of his novel Fathers and Sons, where Bazarov, one of the two protagonists, declares himself a nihilist. The novel, as its title suggests, portrays the rupture between two generations: the fathers, representing the old landed aristocracy, who seek to maintain their privileges while conceding certain points, and the sons, heirs of that declining aristocracy. The latter boast of advocating for the lower classes, repudiating the traditions and inheritance of their fathers, and replacing them with the new philosophical trends of the time. They draw from all the progressive, atheist, materialist, and idealist philosophies of the 19th century. The nihilist character is introduced in a conversation between Arkady, Bazarov's friend, and Arkady's father and uncle.
Pavel Petrovich twirled his mustache. Humph. Well, and what exactly is this Mr. Bazarov? He asked slowly. Who is Bazarov? Arkady smiled. Would you like me to tell you exactly what Bazarov is, uncle? Yes, nephew. Do me that favor. He's a nihilist. A nihilist? Nikolai Petrovich emphasized. If I'm not mistaken, from the Latin nihil, meaning nothing. So, does that word refer to someone who recognizes nothing in no one? Rather, say it refers to someone who respects nothing, Pavel Petrovich corrected him. Or to someone who approaches everything from a critical perspective, Arkady added. And isn't that the same thing? Pavel Petrovich asked. No, it's not the same. A nihilist is someone who bows to no authority, who accepts no principle as a matter of faith, no matter how universally it may be recognized.
Bazarov is a young intellectual, a medical student admired by several other young students for his eloquence, personality, and knowledge. He is not wealthy, although he comes from a declining landowning family. His mother is descended from nobility. He has studied at the university and is well-versed in the philosophical currents of the time. Influenced by materialist tendencies and a sort of utilitarianism, he strives not to show his emotions and despises art. From his mouth come these words.
An honest chemist is 20 times more useful than any poet.
He claims that he believes in nothing, and if someone demonstrates a fact to him, he simply accepts it, that's all. The work addresses the issues of the time in which it was written. Shortly before its publication in 1862, a series of reforms had begun in Russia, still the Tsarist Empire, aimed at attempting to change the desperate social situation marked by the misery of Russian peasants, who were obliged to pay all kinds of tributes, whether through labor or money. Even the landowners themselves recognized the severity of the situation. One of them stated that the peasants ate acorns, tree bark, straw, and swamp grass, while another landowner claimed that even pigs refused to eat the bread consumed by the poor. The fear of a revolution led Tsar Nicholas II to push for such reforms. In his own words, "It is better to abolish the serfdom regime from above than to wait for the moment when it begins to be abolished from below." The most significant of these reforms was the Emancipation Act of 1861, which transformed serfs into landowners who had to pay rent to their former masters. Anyone familiar with Russian history can deduce that this apparent solution was a failure. Even at the time, it left both main sides discontented: the liberal nobility and the revolutionary Narodnik movement, which emerged as a reaction to these reforms. The Narodniks were characterized by their fight against the monarchy and the abuses of the nobility and landowners, advocating for industrial development not through a capitalist system but rather through a form of socialism. In this vein, Arkady's father and uncle represent the liberal nobility, willing to make certain concessions to the peasants but refusing to give up privileges they consider their natural right. The sons, represented by Bazarov, Arkady's friend, align themselves with the revolutionary democratic side. They reject reality, dismiss the prejudices of the people, and even despise the peasants themselves. Paradoxically, the nihilistic and skeptical Bazarov exhibits arrogance and great confidence in his positions, as shown when he does not hesitate to reprimand Arkady during a conversation about marriage.
Well, replied Bazarov calmly. Such nobility of spirit. You still attach value to marriage. I didn't expect that from you.
The nihilist also does not doubt his opinion of the Russian people.
I think I'm beginning to agree with my uncle, Arkady remarked. You clearly have a very low opinion of Russians. Well, what a thing. The Russian is only admirable for the low opinion he has of himself. The only thing that matters is that 2 + 2 = 4. Everything else is nonsense.
However, behind Bazarov's arrogance, which exasperates Arkady's uncle, lies an honest critique. Pavel Petrovich, Arkady's uncle, defends the aristocracy with the following words.
Remember, sir, he repeated, sharpening his tone, the English aristocrats. They do not yield a single bit of their rights, and precisely because of that, they respect the rights of others. They demand that others fulfill their obligations toward them, and precisely because of that, they are willing to fulfill their obligations toward others. The aristocracy not only gave England its freedom, but continues to defend it.
It is enough to analyze 19th century English freedom, described by the eminent liberal Alexander Tocqueville as follows.
The organized forces of a multitude produce for the benefit of a single individual. Here, the slave. There, the master. There, the wealth of a few. Here, the misery of the majority.
Friedrich Engels, philosopher and journalist, recorded the following impressions of the industrial zone of Manchester and his visit to working-class neighborhoods.
The last refuge a man can occupy between misery and death. Yet the wretched souls who inhabit such hovels provoke envy in some of their peers. Beneath these miserable dwellings lies a row of caves accessible through a semi-underground corridor. In each of these damp and repugnant places, 12 or 15 human beings are crammed together in chaos.
Bazarov, as an educated intellectual, is aware of the severe social inequality, not only in Russia but likely also of conditions in other countries, particularly in the great powers. This is why he merely responds.
I've heard that too many times before, but what are you trying to prove with it?
Bazarov despises the old aristocracy and the bourgeoisie as much as the peasants, for he cannot tolerate their traditions or their faith.
And you know how to talk to them, and yet despise them at the same time. So what, if they deserve that disdain?
As a representative of nihilism, Bazarov criticizes all beliefs, but as he himself admits, he proposes nothing. Throughout the novel, he scorns reality until he meets Anna Odintsova, a young and wealthy widow. Little by little, the nihilist stops adhering to his principles and falls in love with her. For her part, Anna Odintsova is drawn to Bazarov's eloquence and ideas but tries to maintain her distance, unwilling to give up her current lifestyle and uncertain whether a relationship would be worth it. This earns her Bazarov's reproaches, to which she responds with a question of her own.
Do you firmly refuse to believe that I am capable of passion? Out of curiosity, perhaps, but not in any other way. Do you really believe that? Well, then I now understand why we get along so well. Because you are just like me.
In fact, Odintsova may be more nihilistic than Bazarov himself. She even says,
I have many memories, but nothing worth remembering, and ahead of me, a long, long road without purpose. I have no desire to travel it.
The tension in their relationship increases until Bazarov, when questioned about his extreme reserve, finally confesses his feelings.
And you want to know why I'm so reserved? What's going on inside me? Isn't that it? Asterisk, yes, Odintsova replied, with a fear she couldn't comprehend herself. And you won't be angry? No, no. Bazarov, standing, still had his back to her. Well then, let me tell you, I love you. Stupidly, madly. Now you see what you've done.
Naturally, Bazarov was not reciprocated. It is not uncommon for nihilists to fail in love. Nietzsche, the most eminent of them, is the clearest example. After this rejection, Bazarov decides to leave Odintsova and visit his parents. He returns, comically, with renewed fervor to his positions. While he never strictly abandoned them, he had ceased acting according to them. Resentment now drives him, as can be seen in the words he says to his friend Arkady.
Well, since you don't understand me properly, let me tell you this. It's better to start breaking stones on a road than to let a woman take even the tip of your finger. All of that is nothing but. And here Bazarov was about to add his favorite word, romanticism, but stopped himself and instead said, nonsense.
In the end, Bazarov and Arkady, who at first presented themselves as freethinkers, revolutionaries, and intellectuals, reveal through their actions that they are not very different from everyone else. Supposedly skeptical of everything, they suffer romantic disillusionments. They are revolutionaries but remain sons of landowners, and Arkady himself eventually takes over his father's estate. Humorously, a woman acquainted with the young men, who, like them, repudiates the bourgeoisie while acknowledging she is part of it, points this out.
You are a dangerous man, very critical. Oh, dear me, it amuses me. I talk like a steppe landowner. Although, to tell the truth, I am a landowner.
Ironically, their critical attitudes blind them to the fact that they are merely following the intellectual fashions of their time. For this reason, Arkady's uncle's mockery is all the more cutting.
Yes, they were Hegelians before, and now they're nihilists.
Or also,
in fact, if before they were merely fools, now, suddenly, they become nihilists.
This is something that still happens today. We are all familiar with the ideologies of the moment and those who, like Arkady and Bazarov, take them as their banner and personality. Above all, it is worth emphasizing the love both protagonists have for their families. At least in their case, nihilism has not broken filial love. Bazarov, a proud atheist, after falling gravely ill, agrees on his deathbed to his father's request to receive a priest for Christian confession and the anointing of the sick.
What is it, Father? Yevgeny, you're feeling better now. If God wills it, you'll recover. But why not take this moment to comfort your mother and me by fulfilling your duties as a good Christian? It's terrible for me to remind you of this, but even more terrible would it be if you for all eternity. Think about it, Yevgeny. The old man's voice broke, while a strange expression began to form on his son's face, which still remained with his eyes closed. I won't refuse if it brings you comfort, he finally replied. But I don't think there's any need to rush. You yourself say I'm feeling better.
The novel received criticism from both conservative and progressive circles. Both sides felt the characters representing them were ridiculed. The author, Turgenev, moved abroad and published almost nothing over the next 5 years. He had already gone into exile before, in 1852, due to the distrust of the Tsarist government. Regarding his nihilist character, he said,
Did I want to denounce or praise Bazarov? Even I cannot answer that question, for I still do not know whether I love him or hate him. I only know that I had no preconceived idea, no specific intention, when I began writing about him. I did so innocently, even surprising myself with what emerged. Let me tell you something. I described all these characters as I would describe a mushroom, some leaves, a tree. They filled my eyes, and I simply drew them.